Hello and welcome to another opinionated esports piece. I am Sam Carlson of spawnroom.com, and today we're going to be talking about why isn't World of Warcraft played competitively. And I should clarify that because when I originally posted this on Reddit, people were confused, I think. They thought I meant, like, some people anyway, thought I meant like competitively at all, like I raid, with a competitive spirit, or I play BGs to win. We're in this sense, we're talking about esports. Why isn't it played competitively? Why isn't it an esport? Why aren't there big tournaments for it? That kind of a thing. So, and I was inspired to write the article and now make the video because every once in a while I will do Google searches for the word esports in the last month and just kind of see what people are talking about and what kind of news and generally discussions. And I every once in a while I come across this question, like, why doesn't WoW have an esports community? Why aren't there tournaments? A lot of people will, like, especially it seems like nowadays with people kind of more aware of esports because of like League of Legends and stuff, people aren't really aware that there was esports in the past. And a lot of the comments and questions are like, they don't realize that WoW used to have a competitive community. As part of MLG and BlizzCon and stuff like that. So yeah, so I wanted to just talk about why did it exist in the past and why doesn't it exist anymore. And before I begin too, I want to just say that I used to play WoW, and I really like the game. I really enjoy it. So this is not like a ripping on WoW. It's not, it sucks because it's not competitive. I actually really like World of Warcraft, or I did. It got boring for me, but I like it and stuff. So this is just kind of an explanation. Okay, so first, WoW has been played competitively. It was at Major League Gaming events between 2008 and 2010. BlizzCon has had tournaments for it, which they just had one last year as part of their World Championship. There has been tens of thousands of dollars put in by MLG, maybe even more, hundreds of thousands by Blizzard, and then there's, other tournaments, and there's pro teams and stuff out there. Even right now there are. It's just not very popular. You almost never see World of Warcraft related news in like the premier esports news websites. I'm pretty highly involved in esports, like paying attention to it and listening to what's going on and following people, and I almost never see World of Warcraft related stuff. So it's pretty much non-existent at that level. And there are reasons for this. So the first one that I see quite often is that World of Warcraft is simply too complicated for esports. And in a way, this is accurate. World of Warcraft is kind of like, when you spectate it, because there are so many moves and because they're being hit so frequently, it's very difficult for spectators and commentators to like keep up. You're hitting buttons, you're spamming them over and over and over again, and it kind of waters down the abilities. Like, it's not very important if he hit this certain damage spell 6 times or 7 times. Like, whereas in StarCraft 2 or League of Legends or Dota 2 or something like that, it's critical when they use a move, and it's a big deal if they choose to use it then or in the future or whatever. It's just there's so much more emphasis placed on it, and it happens at a slower rate. They use that move once, and the commentators can go into detail all about the strategy behind that decision. Whereas in WoW, it ended up being kind of boring because it has to be generalized because it's moving so quickly. It's so hard to track. They just say, well, there's damage going on, there's healing going on, he's got this debuff or whatever. But like, they couldn't really delve into the deep strategy behind it. So in a way, that's true. It's not necessarily that it's too complicated. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's just it's too fast-paced, I guess, to keep up with all the little intricate things that are part of the strategy. And this should be distinguished, and the reason I say too complicated, it might not be the right vernacular, is because while there are a lot of spells and stuff, it's not like people have problems following that. There are so many spells and items and champions and stuff in other esport titles that people follow perfectly fine. So it's not really that it's too complicated, it's just that it's too spammy. It's too hard to commentate, to follow. Um, should also take into account gear, or well, I guess in that sense you don't really take into account gear, because in competitive tournaments, the gear is you're able to like unlock it and use it or whatever. I mentioned that more in the article. If you want to read it, it'll be in the video description. It's kind of hard to. It's pretty well articulated in there, I think, but so you can read it if you want. The game is too old, I've seen arguments for. I immediately dismissed that argument when you consider that Brood War and Dota and Counter-Strike 1.6 have all been played for, close to a decade or more, and that was never a problem. I mean, the graphics were outdated, there were new titles to even replace some of them, and people played the original titles because they were good competitive games, not because they had outdated graphics. So that is immediately dismissed. There's no developer support. That's always a valid point to consider, but that hinges on the reception of the competitive community. If the competitive community is not going to play your game, developer support's not going to help. We see that with I think Shoot Mania right now, where the developer is very behind this idea of making their game an esport, but the competitive community is not really interested in the game, at least not on the level of other shooters, say like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and especially not like StarCraft 2 and League of Legends, Dota 2. Gear requirements are a problem. This is one I do agree with. The fact that players have to, like non-professional players, non-competing players, have to earn their arena gear is kind of like a big hurdle right at the beginning. So it immediately diminishes the amount of like potential competitors, because there's going to be a lot of people that see that and go, I don't want to waste the time or spend all this time trying to get gear, and then when I finally get the gear, then I can start practicing to be a good arena player. Rather than if they were just given the gear, like Guild Wars had that mode where you could unlock all the gear. You just had the gear. It was negligible. You just, you didn't have to worry about it. You could just start training and practicing and getting better at the game. But this is like a huge barrier that they have to cross just to even consider being a competitive player. So that's a big problem in my mind. WoW Arena is boring to watch. This kind of ties into what we were talking about before, where it's just difficult to watch. People kind of it was too repetitive, and it was too difficult to follow. So people they just weren't that interested. MLG events, I don't think the turnout for those kind of events were never that great. I mean, compared to the other titles that were there, it just didn't catch people, especially when you have other titles that are just more popular, and you can run, you as a tournament organizer, if you can run a different tournament that just has more interest, you're going to run that because it costs the same and there's more people going to tune in, So it just, in terms of numbers, it just wasn't there, and that's, probably one very key reason why it just was dropped from MLG. I also read that developer support was a problem too, and that kind of ties into the next one, or developer support was a problem for MLG, and it probably ties into the next, was that balancing is probably the key issue to why World of Warcraft just doesn't have a competitive community. There are too many balance changes on a regular basis that competitive players are just disincentivized to play it, because if you can only play for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and then something completely changes and you have to refigure out all the strategy, that's just not fun. That completely impedes any level of skill that you can develop. Plus, Blizzard is forced to kind of blanket their balance changes to the game. Instead of just focusing on making sure PvP is balanced, they have to also make sure PvE and raiding and battlegrounds are all balanced. They don't really focus on one or the other. Although someone did update me and say that they are considering this or working on it, so that's really cool if they're going to actually do it. The problem is that how dedicated are they actually going to be to it? Are they going to actually have like a dedicated PvP eSports team that makes sure PvP is balanced? Because if they do, that could seriously help the community. But I guess, that we'll have to see how that really turns out. Also, as a last point, random crits can also be a problem. People say, the game is really bursty in a way. So, and randomness is always a horrible thing to have in a competitive title because it just kind of removes any level of skill. If you have random crits that almost kill your player or kill your opponent, that's not utilizing skill. It's just utilizing some dice roll in the background that just you got lucky, and that's always terrible for competitive titles. So the fact that it can be bursty or have the chance at being bursty is just a negative point right away. So yeah, so I guess that really covers it. If you want to go into more detail and understand really why WoW is not a competitive title, I would suggest reading the article. It definitely goes into more detail into each point and stuff like that. But that is the general reason why you don't see major tournaments, you don't see pro teams and players like all over, just like League of Legends and StarCraft 2. So if you've ever been wondering that, hopefully that helps you answer that question. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening. Be sure to check out our other esports shows. We got esports daily news Monday through Friday, interview series with various people within the esports world. Behind the Play handles basic strategy for spectators and players if you've ever wanted to understand a esport title better, either as a spectator or a player. Behind the Play addresses that issue. So thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.